of Africa 50,000 years ago, more or less, to the rest of the world, we still were omnivores. In fact, that only changed somewhat when we discovered agriculture 10,000 years ago. With the advent of agriculture, we started to also domesticate animals. And the domestication of animals, such as cows, donkeys, and so on, meant that we used those animals not as animals of prey for hunting, but we kept them close to us because they were more valuable to us for other reasons than meat, for wool, for milk, for animal traction, and so on. And so we've had this evolutionary relationship with animals where, of course, sometimes they were still important for us also for meat. But our meat consumption actually declined after the advent of agriculture, and it only increased again in the 19th century when we started to have to move in towards a mass production system of agriculture. And for many parts of the world, not least, of course, Asia and Africa, meat consumption at any level only became available to the masses in the last 20-25 years. And today, it's the great demand for cereals, for grains, for animal feed from China that actually drives a lot of our agricultural market system worldwide. In Europe, we eat about 100 grams a day, which is about well, I mean, we could easily do on average with 60-65 grams. So we're eating 1/3 too much of what we should be eating. And the Americans are way off. But there is a serious demand for animal protein in many parts of the world where people eat very little.
To me, far more disturbing is the lives that these animals have, particularly hogs and poultry. If I were such an animal, I'm not keen to anthropomorphize, but if I were such an animal, I would want the fastest train to the slaughterhouse. That to me would be the lottery ticket, because the conditions that the great majority, not all of these animals, but the great majority of them spend their entire lives in, not to mention the bodies that they have been given, which really do destine them for a kind of pain. It's not a coincidence that we slaughter chickens at between 39 and 43 days now. It's not simply because we want to replace the flocks. It's because if they were allowed to live any longer, their bones would start breaking and their tendons would start slipping and they would be unable to stand up. So that's what we've created. You know, that's what we've put the full energy of veterinary science toward creating and propagating.
There is a mistake there. Many people think that the Amazon is being deforested for soybean. That is not the case. Most of the soybean is actually in the Cerrado, which is the savanna type of vegetation. Why? Because the soils in the Amazon are far too poor and far too swampy very often to actually put in a lot of soybean. Right now, I think the big rule is that we should not clear any more land for feed production and touch any forest systems in the world. And that actually should become a commitment, I hope, if we're working now on the next IPCC report, you know, this Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change. I think if we can get governments to not clear land that hasn't been cleared yet, we will probably make a major impact. And that's quite possible. It's possible to feed the world population from the area that's more or less currently in production.
We really need to reduce meat consumption. We need to reduce the amount of meat that we eat. And that's something that everyone in this room is capable of. It is possible that there are places on Earth where, I mean, it is not only possible, it's true, where there are you know, environments in which nothing else can be done other than grazing animals. It is true that there are people who live in inner cities and these urban food deserts, and they have no access to anything but McDonald's or Burger King. This is really tragically prevalent in America. And it is true that there are people who cannot afford alternatives. I don't think that's true of anybody in this audience. And I think there would be a certain irresponsibility in not just saying, you know, in a very straightforward way that everybody should reduce meat consumption by as much as possible.
I would go actually one step further. I would say, as I said, reducing meat consumption or meat and fish, because fish is another problem, is definitely one of the options. Substitution is another. But I think we must ask people in positions of power and public institutions to actually show some leadership in this. This is why I insist on having official banquets being vegetarian banquets. But you could also imagine that there would be a kind of mass movement where people would actually sign in or adhere to a petition or a statement saying, I'm making this commitment to reduce my meat consumption, or I will only eat animal products only a couple of times a week. I mean, that's an individual commitment that people could make. I want you to make another commitment. Please do go and visit a farmer from time to time. Go to farms, and not just to farmers markets, but actually go and make sure you understand what drives farmers. Make sure that they understand that you appreciate them and that there can be a dialogue. I believe one of the major problems we have is that there is such a distinction now between rural life and urban lives. And I think if we do not get a young generation who are proud of being a farmer, young people who want to go into farming, we're going to be in a really very difficult situation. We end up with factory farms just because nobody wants to be farming. And I think it's such an enrichment of your life to actually experience farming firsthand and build up a relationship with a farmer that I really would like you to make that commitment beyond just eating less or no meat.
Okay, thank you very much.